was serving a 6-year sentence for buying and receiving stolen property. State prison officials say he had 4 prior convictions for similar crimes. His family has asked that Harper be suspended and that an investigation be ordered by James to look into the shooting of the 24-year-old convict.
The worst part about the whole thing, I can't even learn how it happened. I can't even learn why it happened. Everybody I call won't tell me nothing. Everybody I talk to. I've lost a son, but yet I gotta just go on just like nothing have happened. I'm sorry, but I just can't take it this way.
Board of Corrections spokesman John Hale said that Commissioner Robert Britton would have no comment on the matter until after the grand jury's investigation. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The proposed city ordinance would require all gold and silver buyers to be licensed. The ordinance wouldn't apply to licensed jewelers, and according to Mayor Emery Fulmer, wouldn't place a burden on the city's legitimate operators. Currently, itinerant silver and gold buyers pay no licensing fee and aren't subject to city sales tax. Montgomery Police Chief Charles Swindle says more than $100,000 worth of silver goods have been stolen from area homes since January. The police chief and Mayor Fulmer agree the ordinance would help deal with the problem of stolen gold and silver. The mayor says he wants to get rid of what he calls some pretty shady characters who deal within the city. Opposition to the ordinance came from Councilman Donald Watkins and Joe Reed. Watkins calls the recommendation a repressive type ordinance. He says innocent buyers would suffer. Council members will vote on the proposed ordinance at next week's council meeting. Sidney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Well, of course, I think that it was necessary at that point to have an expression from the House of Representatives. And it was more or less a position that we held as far as the Personnel Board. And I think the governor has even acknowledged that the memo was probably poor judgment used maybe in the language. So it was an expression of the legislature is what my intent was. I had discussed Dr. Bronner's position with the governor on numerous occasions prior to that time. And of course, again, I have high regard for Dr. Bronner, and he is a brilliant man, but I felt like that it was necessary at this point, with this memo, that we get an expression from the House, and I felt it was my responsibility to lead that expression.
Yes, this is 11 o'clock. We'll give a little more time. We'll go down to 10, 9, 8, and 7.
I know the call for it. These committees are tremendous. I feel like the...
Would you eliminate the necessity for personnel board functioning as far as transfer of mayor employees?
Possibly, the Secretary called all the adoption of the committee minutes. Mr. Bailey, Miller, Mitchell, Parsons, White.
This is my favorite breakfast: eggs, bacon, grits, toast, and coffee. The nutritionists are telling us, though, that we should consider some other foods for breakfast as well as the traditional fare. The type of life we lead should dictate the kind of breakfast we eat. If you have a good exercise program or burn up a lot of calories at work, you should begin the day with a good hearty breakfast. Someone who works hard all morning will need more to eat than someone who sleeps the time away. And if you eat a good breakfast, you'll probably feel more like working all day, too. Here are some things to consider when you're grocery shopping. A light breakfast, the very minimum, should consist of a fruit or fruit juice, a dairy product, and something from the grain family like wheat bread or a good cereal. For a medium breakfast, add a protein. You could try something really different, very high in nutrients like chicken liver. Tuna would be good, also steak salmon or an occasional egg. If you need to eat a hearty breakfast, just add one more ingredient to those we've mentioned. Not another biscuit. Make it a vegetable instead. Try a baked sweet potato. Sound crazy? Well, it has a lot of nutritive value, and it's a taste treat for this time of day. Some other good vegetables to consider are raw tomatoes and chopped cabbage. That's right, for breakfast. There are lots of good things to choose from that are highly nutritious and different from the traditional breakfast foods. As for grains, try some cream of wheat or some wheat germ or rye bread. Remember, unless the grain is whole, you've been cheated. Cantaloupes, watermelon, oranges, honeydews, strawberries, and grapefruits, other fruits as well, are great to fill that fruit category. And with milks, try to stay with skimmed or buttermilk or low-fat milk. Cheese is good also. Remember that you don't have to stick with the usual kind of menu. You can bring out last night's leftovers or try something new. Breakfast is the ideal time to begin combining different kinds of foods. And above all, breakfast is the ideal meal to eat. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman. The Montgomery Complete Count Committee is the group in charge of getting the word out about the census, and there's a census office here to answer questions. It's important that everyone be counted. Money that comes to Alabama from the federal government is based on the census count. The census also helps city planners spot problem areas in a community, such as high unemployment or areas with great numbers of substandard housing. Federal grants are distributed according to census statistics, over $50 billion nationwide. The 1980 figures are expected to show a shift in population and in political power. For the first time, more House seats are expected to represent the Sun Belt than the Frost Belt. Census figures ensure fair representation in government. By Alabama law, also, each city is required to redistrict after each census. This information will also be used to determine the direction of growth for our city and what our needs will be in the coming years. Montgomery itself is said to be located in the fastest growing metropolitan area in the state. Planners also are concerned with energy trends. Some questions will deal with fuel used in your homes and transportation used to get to work. One thing people are concerned about is confidentiality.
But we want all of the people to understand that the information that they give from the questionnaire that is sent to them is held in the strictest confidence. Nobody is entitled to review that information but a sworn census worker who takes an oath that that information will be held in the strictest confidence.
Questions you answer about housing help determine our housing needs, and employment answers aid planners in determining job needs for our community. Your census forms will arrive in the mail on Friday, and they should be returned promptly. If you have any questions at that time, there are two phone numbers to call. One, if you're outside Montgomery, is 1-800-392-8090, or 834-1371 if you're in Montgomery. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman. The information that's gathered by the census is extremely valuable. If a person is missed, a city could lose as much as $200 in federal funding for that one person. In 1970, in the city of Montgomery alone, some 7,000 were missed by the census. This chart shows growth trends in the Montgomery area. In 1970, there were approximately 225,000 in this area. Now the population is expected to surpass 250,000, more than an 11% increase. The city itself has grown from 140,000 to about 180,000, a giant step due mainly to annexation. The birth rate chart also comes from census figures. The blue line shows the total number of births in Montgomery County, a decline in 1976 when only 2,900 babies were born. The red line shows births per 1,000 total population. It simply shows a decline in the rate since 1950 until baby boom babies grew up and started having babies of their own. The green line shows births per 1,000 by women in childbearing years. It shows that women are having fewer babies. Census figures also give us public school enrollment. All over the country, enrollment has been affected by the declining birth rate. The light green area shows student enrollment on the national scale. The dark green shows Montgomery County schools. This chart shows the national trend toward an aging population. The decrease in the birth rate causes a larger percentage of the population to be older, and as the baby boom generation moves through time, they increase the median age even further. That age is now around 28 and should be 36 by the year 2000. This information helps planners provide proper housing and facilities that will be needed by the elderly in the future. The point is, the census information affects every one of us, so it's important for us to fill out our forms and get them in just as soon as possible. All those forms are expected to arrive in the mail tomorrow. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman. This is the first time that all the forms have been sent by mail. If you've received yours, you'll see that the kind of information needed deals with the age, sex, and race of each household member. Also, there'll be questions about the type of house you live in. This information will be asked for in the short form, which will be received by most people. However, there's another form that will be sent to every 6th household. It's a longer form and includes questions about employment, energy, and income.
When a household receives the census questionnaire, they'll also receive a yellow instruction booklet in the same package. And by reading this booklet, you will find most of the answers to the questions that most people will have. It's not really complicated if you just take it a step at a time and read the instructions carefully. On the front page, it asks for a list of the names of persons residing in the household, and then inside the form there is a column for information for each of the people listed on the front page. The questionnaire should be filled out with a black lead pencil so that the computer will be able to read the forms. Very few questions will require a written answer. Most of them can be completed simply by filling in the dots with a pencil.
The Census Bureau wants you to complete the forms and return them by April 1st in the self-addressed envelope provided. If you need help, there's a phone number stamped on each form, 1-800-392-8090, or if you're in Montgomery, call 834-1371. If you still have trouble filling out your form, or you weren't provided a return envelope, just hold on to the form, and a census taker will come to your house. You can identify the census taker by a red, white, and blue identification card that says U.S. Census Enumerator. Census takers will also be working in hotels, bus stations, and campgrounds for a 3-week period to make sure that no one is missed. It's important that everyone be counted in this year's census. The information that's gathered will affect each one of us. So let's be sure to fill those forms out and get them in just as soon as possible. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman.
Some 1,500 people entered today's Super Walk 80. The annual event sponsored by the Montgomery JCs and WHHY Radio is a major fundraising project for the Montgomery area's March of Dimes. March of Dimes officials say between $25,000 to $30,000 is collected each year from walkers who have one or more sponsors pledging at least 10 cents for every mile completed. This morning's race started at Patterson Field with walkers following a 15-mile route. That route was staffed with Montgomery police who directed traffic in major intersections and the JCs who made sure everyone obeyed traffic regulations. Most decided to walk the distance at their own pace and stop a moment at the various checkpoints, while others ran the whole way. And of course, there were those who just couldn't make it. A poop van was provided for them. Near the end of the line, walkers seemed to get that extra spurt of energy to help them to the refreshments and relaxation back at Patterson Field. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
For 5 days, Alabama Power Company has brought to the stand company officials and other witnesses who say the power company needs a 10% rate increase. The witnesses say current low rates of return on company stock make it hard to secure loans at reasonable rates for construction projects. For the past 2 years, Alabama Power Company has not issued stock to raise money because the Securities and Exchange Commission says their earnings aren't high enough. To add to the financial problems, Alabama Power also has a $1.5 billion loan to pay back this September. In coming weeks, more testimony will be heard from the power company and others who either oppose the rate increase or who have intervened. PSC Administrative Law Judge Carl Evans says the commission has until July 28th to make a decision. Evans doesn't expect the hearings to be completed much earlier than the deadline. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission wanted to learn how residents feel about a proposed uranium pellet plant. Westinghouse Corporation wants to build the plant in Autauga County, and part of the licensing procedure requires opportunity for public input. About 150 Central Alabamians took the opportunity to express fears about nuclear waste disposal, transportation of radioactive materials, and the possibility of a nuclear accident.
The leading and prominent cancer specialists say the only prevention of cancer is to control this nuclear output, and we've got to make every effort to stop it as soon as possible. Thank you.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission will speak to citizen concerns in an environmental impact statement. Filing of the statement is just one step in the complicated licensing process, and that process could be slowed further if citizens oppose the plant. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
What amount of radioactivity?
It's sponsored nationally by the American Institute of Public Service and locally by WSFA TV. The Jefferson Awards are presented each year for public service. In January, public appeals were made asking for nominees. To be eligible, a nominee must have had a lasting impact on the community with sincerity of commitment to public service and must never have been publicly recognized. On February 29th, a panel of judges screened the 200 applicants from all over the state and made a final decision. This year, 2 awards were given. Sadie Knoll, who was a nurse and volunteer counselor at Tutwiler Prison, and Chuck Maney, who's a Boy Scout leader for a group of handicapped Boy Scouts. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Sadie Knoll.
We've had a substantial amount of dialogue with the legislature on this issue, and the impressions I'm receiving from legislators is that they are not through with the Medicaid funding problem for this fiscal year, but they felt like they had given us enough dollars to sustain the program for June 1, and they plan to come back to the issue. But I'm caught in a bind with respect to the federal guidelines, even though I feel cautiously optimistic that the legislature can provide us with some additional dollars. I still have to work with what I have, and that's why we're starting this notification process again.
Last time there was a strike, some of the players on the big league clubs came down and worked out with the minor league clubs just to stay in shape. Still that possibility?
That possibility. Matter of fact, these guys know if there is a strike, it will end soon. So they want to stay in shape, and they'll do everything they can to stay in shape by playing, and they'll go to a minor league team like Montgomery and come and work out and perhaps play a few ball games.
So there's a possibility that some major league stars will be coming down here and working out.
There's that possibility, and we certainly hope so, because it'd be good baseball. Bring some of these guys who've been playing on the major league squad, come down and play in Montgomery, and let the people in Montgomery see them again, because chances are they've played in Montgomery before.
Would they mostly come down to the Evansville team, and then would some Evansville players come down to Montgomery, or how would it go through the system?
That's possible. That's possible again, and I think, though, you'll find that the ball players will probably just find a place to play, and because it'll be kind of disorganized as far as getting the team set. And they'll be looking for a place to play. Whether they all go to Evansville or all come to Montgomery, it's up in the air right now. I have no idea how that'll work out.
But the loss of the big league cities might be the minor league cities' gain right now.
You know it.
It was a sharing time for all the kids who attend the Children's Center. They showed that they, too, have a lot to be happy about. Guest of honor for the occasion was former Governor George Wallace. His visit held a very special meaning for the center students.
And all of us in that category of some inconvenience have accepted ourselves as we are. And I want to congratulate the staff, congratulate all of you, congratulate you who are going to perform on the particular program today.
The Handicapped Horizon Day program featured a fashion show with such noted celebrity lookalikes as Mr. Minnie Pearl, Mean Joe Green, and O.J. Simpson. It was evident the audience knew great talent when it saw it. Everyone loved the bell choir, Christie Register singing, and an exciting magic show. It was a day to remember for those attending, and one the children will probably never forget. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Leon Clardy lives near Millbrook on the Alabama River. Last May, he told us that Alabama Power Company inundated his property by opening gates at Martin Dam, sending floodwaters downstream. He said the power company knew heavy rains were coming and could have made storage space for them.
Whoever is in charge now have a right second to God to decide who they're going to flood, when they're going to flood them, whether it's above the dam or below the dam. And I don't think any person should have that right.
Late this afternoon, Clardy's lawyer filed suit against Alabama Power in Montgomery Circuit Court. The suit charges the utility with operating dams without regard to the life or property of persons downstream. Clardy is asking for almost $1 million in compensation for damages and $50 million in punitive damages. Alabama Power officials say they'll have no comment on the suit until they've seen it. But last May, they answered Clardy's charges by saying it was impossible to predict the heavy rains, and they claimed they acted responsibly at the time. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
When they identified themselves to the three people that they were making the purchase from, a fight ensued, and in the fight, Agent West was shot in the right chest area. And of course, he was carried to a local hospital there in Enterprise for treatment. It seems that it was not as serious as first thought. The bullet entered approximately 6 inches below the arm area and hit a rib, and then went around the rib cage and out the back. And he is supposed to be released from the hospital today.
Car lovers from throughout the South gathered at Montgomery Civic Center to talk, buy, sell, trade, and admire antique cars. It was the first annual invitational meet of the Central Alabama Antique Automobile Club. Over 60 refurbished autos dating back to the 1900s were on display. Trophies were awarded to winning entries, but anyone connected with one of these antiques would tell you they weren't there for the prize. Bob Lonsdale is one of those devoted antique car lovers, but he doesn't like to own them. He likes to restore them, and he even has his own restoration business. Some dealers say he's one of the best in the country. Restoring these old cars has been Lonsdale's hobby and first love for about 15 years, and he comes to these shows to meet people who share this special love of classic cars.
What makes a person love to restore antique cars?
There's probably a different answer for every person you ask. Nostalgia, they had a car like that when they were young. They saw a car like that and liked it and wanted to restore one. Any number of reasons.
Lonsdale says interest in antique cars is growing. He predicts owning and restoring antique cars will become one of America's most popular pastimes. Sidney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
I believe that this statement, and there are other elements which I won't read, National Blood Program. Next. Program was given 5 general purposes. We feel that in order to accomplish this difficult task, purposes, and that's one that it's absolutely essential that the public know what we're doing, how we're doing it. Public needs to know something about what it costs in time, in people's commitments, whether these people be employees of a company that is allowing them to donate blood, or whether they be volunteers who are serving on Red Cross committees. I suspect everyone here is aware of the fact that all best wishes to
Dr. Barker, we can't find...
It's the biggest show in Lake Placid since the Olympics ended in February. Nearly $3 million worth of merchandise up for sale to the general public at what some are calling bargain prices. All the items to be sold here in the old Olympic arena were used to help stage the Olympics in one way or another, from coffee makers to paint to snow shovels never used for lack of snow. The important thing here is to sell as much of this merchandise as quickly as possible, and to do that, the price must be right. The Olympic Committee bought much of this equipment at prices well below the retail value. Some was even given to Lake Placid. So Olympic officials now say that virtually everything up for sale here will go for at least the original wholesale price or below. For example, a $1,000 snowblower will be sale priced at around $500 or $600. 900 cases of toilet paper will sell for $18 a case, 40% below normal. And 1,000 clock radios will sell for little more than half what the Olympic Committee paid for them. That's not all. There's an endless array of merchandise on the block, including furniture, carpeting, Superman comic books, and programmable home computers. Some of the stuff has never been opened. Organizers hope to make close to $2 million on the sale, money that is desperately needed to help keep the Lake Placid Olympic Committee from going bankrupt.
We look upon it as perhaps as important as the Olympic Games. The money we derive from the sale, from bid packets that were put out, and ultimately an auction, will determine whether or not this corporation leaves this community in the black or the red.
Two weeks ago, Cessna laid off 750 workers from its light plane division when tight credit and high interest rates caused the light plane market to nosedive. Now, two factors have combined to create a severe cash flow problem in the jet and multi-engined aircraft divisions. A parts shortage left the company with an inventory of $200 million worth of airplanes that are not ready for delivery. That, combined with worsening economic conditions, caused Cessna to lay off 800 more workers and shut down its main assembly line for 3 to 5 weeks. That will idle another 1,500 workers. Another 200 workers were fired for excess absenteeism and poor efficiency ratings. In all, 3,000 workers are out of a job. While acknowledging some internal problems, Cessna president and chairman of the board, Russ Meyer, put the lion's share of the blame on the federal government. He said the Carter economic package is too little and too late.
To think that cancellation of Saturday mail deliveries, imposition of a fuel tax, and minimal cuts out of next year's budget, not this year's, will solve today's problems reflects either a lack of understanding or leadership, or perhaps both.
Cessna accounts for 57% of the general aviation market and is viewed as the indicator for industry trends. If history holds true, aircraft workers across the nation may find themselves on the outside looking in.
According to Dr. Teague, the rumor is unfounded. He says he first heard the rumor last Friday and has no idea where or how it started.
I do not believe that the governor's trying to get rid of me. You'd have to ask him whether he's displeased with some things. I'm sure anyone in the job I'm on will not please everybody all the time. I talked to the governor yesterday about the board meeting Monday, about the agenda items, and it's my total belief that there's nothing like this coming up tomorrow.
Dr. Teague says during that meeting with Governor James, they talked about the state's educational needs in the months and years ahead. In February, the majority of the State Board of Education voted to renew Dr. Teague's contract for the next 4 years. The only opposition came from board member Ron Creel. Dr. Teague says Creel continues to try and drum up things against him, but says he feels the board as a whole is solid in their support for him. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Characteristics going. Birth date, marital status, education.
Yeah, to be close to the real one.
You were looking at something and you just had a little thing in your hand and you saw something, freeze it, look at it closer, like names, addresses, and all that. On the end of these, you know, by the 20 greatest judges of Johnny.
Whatever assistance we can to the public in getting their questionnaires completed. If people are having problems with them, we do have the center set up here at Gibbs.
I think they printed the questionnaires in Vietnamese.
Try to get a sample form and start looking at somebody with somebody else about it. No.
You want a person that's not connected to the bureau?
How long have you been with the city?
The word Passover comes from the biblical story of the 10 plagues, when the angel of death took the life of the firstborn child in every Egyptian home, but passed over Jewish homes whose doors were marked with lamb's blood. Jewish people have observed the rite of Passover for more than 3,000 years. It's celebrated at the synagogue and at home. The Passover celebration at home includes a ritual which depicts the Jewish history of enslavement. Together, the family partakes of wine and recites psalms and folk tales. Children are also a special part of the Passover ritual, asking certain questions about this special night. Passover begins at sundown today and continues for 7 days. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Governor James says he called the meeting because he felt the Board of Education was moving slowly in its effort to wage war on the problems that could be causing Alabama student performance levels to fall below the national averages. The board thumbed through the results of last spring's achievement test, which show an overall upward trend. But James wants the board to notice particular problem areas.
Tangible activity and a relationship that deals in terms of specific schools, specific problems, specific solutions, the implementation of same, and the monitoring of same.
The board will meet again Thursday to spend more time on the issue and possibly consider the organizational chart of the Department of Education showing how many jobs, if any, will be eliminated because of austerity cuts in the budget. A final draft of any organizational changes is hoped to be completed within the next 2 months, and any job reductions would be effective 1 year later. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
State Liquor Administrator Joe Broadwater says the state plans to open the new liquor store at this site around May 1st. He says it will be a self-service store as well as a warehouse. Several groups of citizens in the Normandale area object to the store's location near a branch of the library. And the congregation at the Normandale Baptist Church is opposed to the liquor store because it's close to their church. The pastor, Dr. Earl Hall, says his congregation wasn't told of the store until recently.
We're trying to check out legal avenues and all, and of course our people are seeking to express themselves. We just don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
Liquor Administrator Broadwater says State Senator Donald Harrison has asked that the store not be opened. Broadwater says the request will have to be discussed by the ABC board. According to Broadwater, the Clayton Street store will be closed when the Normandale store is opened. He says 3 other stores in Montgomery will be closed, but he won't know which ones until a survey is made of the stores that are losing business. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
I'm very frightened.
About what's going to happen in the next few days?
Yes, because you don't know. What do you know about water? You know, and this is an awfully big river. And it's out, we have a huge field on the other side of the river that has gone out into that. But now it's really coming on over into here. And it's a frightening thing. It really is to be down here all alone.
Governor James and the educators discussed education during a meeting at the governor's mansion. James called the 3-hour meeting informative and a good way to get a grasp on problems facing education and the state.
We have for now a number of months been meeting with folks like this organization, other elements of education, elements of business, elements of labor, and trying to get a grasp on the problems that face the state and their concerns.
Paul Hubbard, Executive Director for AEA, says education's priorities are proper funding and how teachers will be affected by such funding.
I think only time will tell, George. We had some very frank eyeball-to-eyeball discussion, and I think that's always good. I think he understands the disillusionment that a lot of teachers feel with this year's budget. And if he will act on that, I think it will generate some good feelings both ways. On the other hand, if he doesn't, then I doubt that anything will have come of the meeting.
The biggest hang-up then is wages?
Yes, yes, no question.
The success or non-success of the meeting between educators and the governor may surface today when the legislators meet. The House comes in at 1, the Senate at 2. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Better believe it.
This historic Normandale arcade is going to close down. Come on.
There are 64 private clubs in the city of Montgomery, and very soon 6 of them will be closed temporarily for violating the state liquor laws. In each case, the clubs were cited for selling liquor to non-members. Max Tavern will close this Friday for 10 days as punishment. The Montgomery Satellite Club, now known as Leroy Brown's, will also close for 5 days, beginning on Friday. Next Monday, 4 other private clubs will close. Sonny's is to shut down for 5 days, along with JJ's and the H&T Club. The Pavilion Club is also scheduled for closing on Monday for selling to non-members, as well as allowing gambling. Their shutdown time, 7 days. Broadwater says the private club offenses go beyond selling to non-members.
Actually, it's a means of circumventing the law. It turns out to be it's a place that sells alcoholic beverages to go on Sunday. And this is not what the private club was intended to be.
Broadwater says his department hopes to get legislation to help clear up some of these problems. In the meantime, he says the state wants to control liquor sales at private clubs. After all, he says, it's easier than dealing with bootleggers. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Tight finances have made it profitable for gold and silver dealers to buy people's gold and silver coins, jewelry, and silverware. But police say the buyers also provide an easy way for thieves to fence stolen goods. Montgomery police have no control over buyers of precious metals. Unscrupulous buyers don't have to register their names or purchases, and police say that makes it easy to break up or melt down stolen gold and silver. Under the new ordinance, a buyer of precious metals would have to get police approval for a license to operate in Montgomery. He'd also be required to submit records of all the property he buys and from whom he buys it. Then he's not allowed to sell or change the form of the property for 72 hours. City officials hope the new ordinance will help police keep track of stolen property. Without the measure, evidence such as this stolen silver could simply melt away. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
The table wine bill discussed and read at length is on its way to the state Senate. Representative Thomas Sandusky of Mobile says his measure increases the tax on a gallon of wine from $1.25 to $1.78. And he says will also increase state revenues by $2 million. Representative Bob McKee of Montgomery says the state is paying $2 in alcoholic rehabilitation for every dollar it receives through such sales. He says mental health rehab programs on alcoholism have increased from 17 to 60 in 10 years. The House rejected a bill to place a 2% administrative fee on loans made by Alabama lending institutions. A letter from Governor Fob James to the House Speaker and read by the House Clerk revealed the governor is no longer being assisted by David Bronner in his ongoing analysis of manpower costs for state government. James says that's the responsibility of Finance Director Sid McDonald. The House had asked James by resolution not to give Bronner sole authority in personnel matters. The Senate, meanwhile, argued over its adoption of a special order calendar before getting down to business. A constitutional amendment to increase state individual income taxes will come up another day. The bill's sponsor, Senator Finas St. John, says the bill would have repealed any gasoline tax increase the legislature passed this year. Its measure raises state income taxes by disallowing federal tax payments as a state deduction. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
The airport authority contends that Eastern has a lease that runs through 1993, but Eastern, who's pulling its service out of Montgomery at the end of May, claims that when they leave, their lease ends. The authority agreed to ask Eastern's regional property manager, John Hearn, to write a letter outlining the company's position on the lease. Board Chairman Don Reynolds says that if the letter says Eastern won't honor the last 12 years of the lease, the board will sue for the money.
They either owe us all that money or they have the opportunity to sublet part of their space to Ocean Airways, for instance.
How much money are we talking about over a 12-year period?
In the neighborhood of $200,000 at today's rates.
Ocean Airways has scheduled to begin services in Montgomery when Eastern leaves. Ocean, Republic, and Delta Airlines are now negotiating for ticket office space when that change goes through, but it's not known what effect the lawsuit with Eastern will have on the transition to Ocean. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The ordinance requires anyone whose business is the buying of second-hand gold and silver to have a license to deal in Montgomery. One disputed section of the ordinance deals with a requirement that buyers submit records to the police department every day listing the items they bought and the persons who sold them. Police Chief C.E. Swindle says the requirement won't hurt legitimate gold and silver buyers, but will enable the police department to track down stolen goods. Councilman Donald Watkins voted against the ordinance, saying it gives Montgomery the image of a police state. Luther Oliver disagreed, saying that the ordinance would have no teeth if it didn't require daily reports to the police. The council passed the ordinance 7-2. Councilman Joe Reed joined Watkins in voting against it. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
According to the Housing Authority, a leaking gas stove is considered an emergency maintenance call. A tenant is charged $12.50 for each emergency call answered. But project managers say many of these calls are non-emergencies, like a clogged sink, a problem the tenant could easily fix. One manager suggested educating the tenants on what is and what is not an emergency, as a money-saving measure for both parties. A schedule of charges the tenants would pay for repair services was also adopted. Currently, tenants pay only a third of what most repairs normally cost. The board hopes the new schedule of increased charges will make the tenants more aware of their own repairing abilities. Housing Authority Vice Chairman Frank Parquette says another housing project for the elderly is badly needed. He says the elderly have earned their place in life, and he asked the board to make the project its #1 goal. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Mr. Clifford Priest, and government. And don't forget to check. Place winner receives $50.
Auburn officials say the facility is the largest single gift ever given to the university by living persons. The buildings and grounds will primarily be used by Auburn forestry students in the summer. In the past, forestry students have had to travel over the state to get the required practical experience. Now, students and their instructors will stay here for 1 quarter of study. Mrs. Thelma Dixon named the auditorium for her late husband Charles in honor of his work as a forest industrialist. Solon Dixon restored the old Dixon home, which will serve as a museum, library, and reception area for guests. On hand for today's dedication were Governor Fob James, local and state officials, agricultural officials, representatives of Auburn University. Those present praised the Dixons for their donation and their hard work in